The night air at Chicago O'Hare smelled of jet fuel and coffee. Suitcase wheels rattled across the curbside pavement, each sound swallowed by the roar of planes lifting off into blackness. Grandpa stood among us, a Utah Jazz cap pulled low over his weathered face, clutching the handle of his suitcase like it was the last thing tethering him to this earth. He had been dreaming of this moment for months. The great family trip to Alaska, 10 cabins reserved on a gleaming white cruise ship, cousins reunited after years apart, and Grandma's ashes finally scattered at Glacier Bay, just as she'd always wished. For him, it was more than a vacation. It was closure, a full circle, a way to trade the dust of his ranch for one final memory of light and water with the people he loved most. But Grandpa never cried. He was a rancher, forged in storms and bone-breaking summers. He bled dust, not tears. That's why, when Dad stepped in front of him at the terminal doors, boarding pass held up like a sheriff's badge, we all froze. "You can't travel," Dad said, voice cold and certain. "Doctor's note says you're not fit." In his hand was a sheet of paper, white, crisp, and freshly printed. The signature at the bottom was shaky, almost childlike, as though forged in haste. A convenient excuse wrapped in authority. The kind of document no one dares to question when it's waved under fluorescent lights. Grandpa blinked, confused. His gaze fell to the stack of tickets tucked into Dad's other hand. 10 golden rectangles of promise, each one paid for with the sale of his ranch. Dad slid them out of reach with a smoothness that made my stomach turn, fanning them like poker chips at a table Grandpa wasn't invited to sit at. "Security's on the way," Dad added, his voice firm enough to echo. Headlights swept across the curb, washing us all in stark light. Uncles, aunts, cousins, faces I'd grown up with, turned away, suddenly fascinated with their shoes, their phones, the cracks in the pavement. Even Pastor John, the man who blessed our barbecues and prayed over Grandpa's birthdays, kept his eyes low. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Grandpa's voice cracked for the first time in my life. "I sold the ranch," he whispered, his throat tightening, "so you all could go together." For a second, silence held us hostage. Then Dad smiled, a thin, shark smile, sharp and calm. "We will," he said. He pointed past Grandpa to the rideshare lane, his tone dripping with finality. "You won't." A TSA supervisor stepped closer, clipboard in hand. "Sir," she said to Grandpa, "you've been flagged for a travel restriction." The words hit like a gavel. Travel restriction? What restriction? Grandpa's medical records were clean. He could still haul hay bales heavier than me. There was no reason except the one standing smugly in front of him. Grandpa's eyes, worn from decades under sun and storm, shifted to me, the only one still looking at him, the only one not pretending this was normal. "Kiddo," he said, voice rough but steady, "check your email." My phone buzzed just then, as if the universe itself were answering his plea. I unlocked it, thumb trembling, and there it was, a subject line that detonated every nerve in my body. Transfer confirmation, won $200,000. Kodiak Family Memories, LLC. My chest tightened as I opened it. The details glared back, wire transfer complete, assets cleared, destination listed with surgical precision. I scrolled down, breath stuck in my throat. At the bottom, the LLC's official mailing address glowed like a knife in the dark, my dad's P.O. box. The airport loudspeaker blared our family name, boarding call echoing like a final bell. The line at the gate was closing. My family shuffled forward, eyes fixed anywhere but here. Grandpa stood motionless at the curb, suitcase in hand, betrayed by the very son he had trusted most. The man who should have carried him onto that ship had just carved him out of his own dream. Dad walked away without looking back, and in that moment, under the neon glare of Terminal 2, the foundation of our family cracked so loudly I swore even the planes could hear it. Back in Maple Ridge, our cul-de-sac smelled like wet grass, fertilizer, and quiet judgment. The kind of neighborhood where lawns were measured like trophies, mailboxes had to be regulation height, and gossip traveled faster than the mail truck. We pulled into Grandpa's driveway in silence, his old Chevy truck parked where it always sat, its hood wearing a halo of dust like a crown of abandonment. The faded cattle brand welded to the grill was a reminder of the life he'd left behind, the ranch that no longer belonged to him. As we got out of the car, the morning sun caught something on the driver's side. My stomach dropped. Someone had dragged a key down the paint, carving a single word so deep it cut through the metal like an accusation etched in stone. Thief. The group chat buzzed before I could even process it. My phone lit up with notifications, each one a dagger from the people who were supposed to be family. Aunt Lisa. Please don't make drama. Uncle Trevor. We already left port. Pastor John. Honor thy father. Their words scrolled across the screen like commandments from a different Bible. A gospel written in cowardice. They had already boarded the ship, drinking champagne and posing for selfies, while the man who paid for it all stood here with nothing but betrayal in his pockets. Then came the letter. Thick, official, stamped with the smug logo of a law office Dad loved to post selfies from. The kind of place with glass walls and leather chairs meant to intimidate. Grandpa's hands shook as he opened it, the veins in his knuckles raised like ridges on a map. The words inside were colder than any courtroom. Emergency Guardianship Petition. The petition accused him of cognitive decline. It claimed he had made impulsive sales decisions. It sought control of his remaining assets. I could barely breathe as I read. Remaining assets? He had none. He'd sold the ranch for us, for them. And now Dad was using that sacrifice as evidence to strip away the last thing Grandpa had left. His freedom. I drove him to the bank the next morning, hoping at least his small savings could keep him afloat. The teller's expression was tight, rehearsed, the kind they train for when they have to deliver news that could break someone in two. "I'm sorry," she said, sliding his card back across the counter. "Your account has been temporarily frozen. Your son requested protection measures. Protection." The word tasted bitter. "Protection from what?" Grandpa didn't blink. His jaw locked, his eyes narrowing into steel. "From the truth," he muttered, voice so low I almost didn't catch it. We left the bank and drove straight to the realtor's office, a glass-front building that gleamed with the promise of easy deals. She greeted us with a smile too polished, her nails tapping against the desk as though she were playing a silent piano. "The sale closed fast," she said brightly. Buyer was a ministry nonprofit. "Sweet story, really. They said they wanted to preserve the land's legacy." She leaned forward then, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But between us?" The offer came in cash, funneled through something called Kodiak Family Memories, LLC, donor-advised fund. Very clean, very efficient. Efficient. The word rattled in my skull. Clean was what you called money after it had been scrubbed of fingerprints. Efficient was what you called theft when you wanted to sound professional. On the way back, my phone buzzed again, this time with a motion alert from the Ring camera at Grandpa's porch. The timestamp read 3:06 a.m. I tapped the screen, heart pounding, and the footage loaded grainy and dark. A hooded figure approached the steps, shoulders hunched, movements sharp and deliberate. Then the hood tilted just enough for the porch light to catch his jawline, his gait, his hands. My breath stopped. It was Dad. He set a black duffel bag on the porch with the care of someone leaving a bomb, then vanished into the shadows. We opened it together, Grandpa's hands steady as mine trembled. Inside was not money, not documents, but relics. Objects sharp enough to cut the past wide open. The first was an old branding iron, rusted but unmistakable, etched with our family's cattle mark. The second was a charred photograph, edges blackened and curling, half melted from fire. I leaned closer, heart pounding as I recognized the image. A little girl in braids standing beside the barn that had burned down in 1998. A fire that had scarred the family forever, whispered about but never explained. And then the last piece. A folded note scrawled in permanent marker, words bleeding like wounds. "We remember what you did." The silence in that moment was heavier than any courtroom verdict. I turned to Grandpa, expecting him to break, to crumble under the weight of the accusation. But he didn't flinch. His face was carved from stone, his eyes dark with something between fury and sorrow. He ran a calloused thumb over the branding iron, over the ashes of the photograph, and then he whispered words that shattered me more than the note itself. "I remember," he said. His voice was steady, defiant, resolute. Then he looked at me, the firelight of truth burning in his eyes. But he did it. The world tilted. My stomach knotted. He wasn't talking about himself. He was talking about Dad. And in that instant, I knew the secrets of 1998 were about to claw their way back from the ashes. The past has a way of clawing its way back when you least expect it. For Grandpa, that past lived in a single night, August of 1998, when the sky above the ranch glowed the color of molten copper and ash drifted down on the soybean fields like black snow. The barn went up in flames so fast the neighbors said it looked staged, like an inferno waiting for the strike of a match. People whispered. People doubted. The sheriff's report didn't help. It listed accelerant detected in bold, the kind of phrasing that stuck to a man's reputation like tar. Insurance investigators came. Church ladies gossiped over casserole. And though Grandpa was never charged, the story lived on. At every potluck, every feed store counter, the rumor was the same. He burned it for the money. The fire never died. We carried the duffel bag with its rusted branding iron, charred photograph, and the note that screamed of old sins to the county station. Deputy Morales, a woman with streaks of gray in her braid and the steady calm of someone who'd seen decades of small-town betrayals, met us at the desk. She still called Grandpa Sir even now. Her eyes scanned the note with sharp precision, lingering on the words, "We remember what you did." Then she looked up, meeting his weathered face. "You know who left this?" she asked. Grandpa didn't hesitate. His voice was steady. "My son." Morales leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Why now?" Grandpa's gaze fell to the floor, heavy with decades of silence. "Because the ranch is gone," he said quietly. "And the secrets were stapled to it." I pulled county records that night, hunched over the glowing screen of my laptop in the dark. The property sale, the nonprofit buyer, the glowing promises of preservation, it all looked legitimate. Until I dug deeper. The ministry buyer shared an officer with Kodiak Family Memories, LLC. Different name. Same mailbox. The one registered under Dad's P.O. box. The two entities weren't separate at all. They were masks. Thin veils draped over the same predator. Morales moved fast. She petitioned a judge to unseal the old fire file. The case box arrived the next morning, dust-coated and brittle at the edges. Inside, tucked in an evidence bag clouded with age, was a melted Zippo lighter. The initials scratched into its surface stopped my breath cold. J.R. James Robert. My father. The deputy's jaw tightened. "Chain of custody broke years ago," she warned. "We can't use it in court. Too old, too messy. A defense attorney would rip it to shreds." Grandpa sat across from her, hands folded on the desk. Rancher's hands, calloused, scarred, stronger than most men half his age. He stared at the lighter for a long moment, then spoke with the weight of a confession he'd carried for decades. "I lied in '98, he said. His voice was low, thick with gravel. "I told the town it was me. I stood in front of the sheriff and took the blame. I pledged the ranch as collateral to cover what the insurance wouldn't. I did it to keep a boy out of jail." Morales blinked, stunned. "You confessed to something you didn't do." Grandpa nodded once, slow and deliberate. "I thought love could fix it. I thought protecting him would make him better. Instead, it made him worse." The air in that office pressed down on my chest until I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, to demand why he had carried this burden alone, why he had sacrificed everything for someone who would repay him with betrayal. But before I could speak, my phone rang. An unknown number. The voice on the other end trembled with nerves. "Ma'am, I'm a paralegal for the cruise line. I can't say much, but I thought you should know. Your family's reservation wasn't booked as a family trip." "What do you mean?" I asked, pacing the room. "It was processed as a corporate retreat." Papers shuffled on her end of the line. "The memo line says celebrate freedom." I froze. "Celebrate freedom?" "Yes, and there's more," she whispered. "A VIP suite was booked under your father's name only. One guest." My skin went cold. "One guest?" "But we had 10 cabins," she exhaled, nervous. "Those were split after payment cleared." 9 went to Kodiak Family Memories LLC staff. The VIP suite includes a private butler, secured access, and a lockable safe. Your father was the only registered individual guest. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. The cruise wasn't for us. It was never for us. It was a cover, a celebration for Dad's shadow company, his cult of greed masquerading as a family memory business. Morales watched me pale as I relayed the news. Her jaw tightened further. She turned back to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Within minutes, she traced the ranch sales wire trail, following threads most people would never think to pull. Then her eyes widened, and her voice dropped into something darker than shock. "There wasn't just one transfer," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked, throat tight. "The $1.2 million you saw, that was only part of it. A decoy. There was another wire, larger." She turned the screen toward me. Numbers blazing. $6.4 million. The funds had been funneled into a separate account, hidden under layers of shell entities Grandpa had never heard of. His name wasn't on it. His signature wasn't on it. He hadn't agreed to any of it. The room tilted. My pulse thundered in my ears. Dad hadn't just stolen the ranch. He had sold something bigger, something more valuable than land. And Grandpa had no idea what that could even be. Grandpa's eyes, weathered and unflinching, locked on the screen. "There's another deal," he said. His voice carried the sound of someone realizing the betrayal ran deeper than blood. And in that moment, I understood. The fire of 1998 had never really burned out. It had only smoldered, waiting for oxygen, and now it was roaring back to life, ready to consume everything. 6.4 million. Not 1.2. The number stared at us from the deputy's computer screen like it had claws, like it was daring us to breathe. Grandpa's jaw hardened, his weathered face settling into lines carved deeper than the canyons he'd worked all his life. "There was a second deal I never signed," he muttered, almost to himself. That's when it became clear. If we were going to find the truth, we'd have to dig into the only battlefield America respects: paperwork. 2 nights later, we rolled up to a storage unit on the edge of town, the kind of place where dreams and secrets go to gather dust. The padlock was frosted with rust, the keypad clunky and ancient. But Grandpa's old code still worked, clicking open like a coffin lid. Inside, stacked neatly as if he had known this day would come, sat a banker's box labeled in his tight handwriting, Timberline Trust. Next to it, a cassette recorder wrapped in faded bandanas, and on top, a notarized letter addressed to me, dated 3 months before the ranch sale. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it, the paper thin as dried leaves. "Kiddo," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I failed to keep peace. The ranch has 2 hearts, surface and water. Your dad wanted the water. He found a buyer, a bottling company that pays like sin. I refused. So I split the deed. I sold the surface for $1.2 million to give you all one last ride together. I put the water in an irrevocable trust in your name so it would feed the valley, not plastic. If anyone comes for you, press play." My pulse pounded as I unwrapped the cassette recorder. My thumb hesitated over the play button, then pressed. Static filled the room, followed by Grandpa's voice, calm but strained. Then another voice cut through, sharp, angry, unmistakable. "Dad's! Sign the water rights!" Dad snarled on tape. "You owe me. I owe you a conscience," Grandpa shot back, his voice firm. "You burned the barn. I cleaned it up. I was 15, Dad snapped, rage blistering each word. "You chose the ranch over me." The tape hissed, then captured the words that would end him. "Then I'll sell it without you." I set up Kodiak. I pulled guardianship papers. "If you resist, I'll prove you're incompetent. And you'll die in that house while I drink your river." The unit's buzzing fluorescent light seemed to grow louder, a cruel soundtrack to betrayal immortalized on magnetic tape. Morales, listening with us, exhaled slow and heavy. "That's wire fraud," she said grimly. "Elder abuse. Maybe racketeering." She didn't have to add the obvious. We had enough to drag Dad into a courtroom and strip the smile off his face. And that courtroom came fast. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. the place where Dad intended to have the court hand him Grandpa's life as neatly as a deed. We packed every weapon of truth we had, the tape recorder, the Timberline trust documents, the notarized letter, the transfer sheets, even the black duffel with its branding iron and burned photograph. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and new fear. Families whispered outside probate chambers, voices lowered as though secrets could still be contained by volume. We walked into the hearing room, fluorescent lights humming like bees, oak-paneled walls pressing down like a jury of ghosts. Dad was already there, straightening his tie, flashing the same smug smile he wore in HOA newsletters and Sunday barbecues, as if charm could bleach the rot from his soul. He locked eyes with us, unbothered, even amused. The judge, a weary man with half-moon glasses and a voice dulled by decades of liars, asked Grandpa to stand. "Sir, do you understand these proceedings?" Grandpa rose slowly, his body old but unbroken, his chin lifting with the same pride that once held a ranch together. "Yes, Your Honor," he said clearly, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd been underestimated for too long. Then he turned, not to the judge, not to the room, but directly to Dad. His eyes, storm-dark and unblinking, cut through the silence like a branding iron through flesh. "And one more thing," Grandpa said. The pause was electric. He squared his shoulders, steady as ever. "You're not my son." The room froze. Papers rustled. A clerk gasped. The air itself seemed to recoil. Dad's smile faltered for the first time, his laugh bursting out too loud, too forced, the kind of laugh a man uses when panic claws at his throat. "Then who am I?" he shot back, his voice ricocheting around the chamber like a challenge, like a threat. And with that single question, the ground beneath our family cracked wide open, dragging us all into a truth darker than the fire of 1998, deeper than the theft of millions, a truth that would decide whether blood meant anything at all. Grandpa's voice did not shake as he stood before the court, his shoulders squared against the weight of decades, his eyes locked on the man who had once been his son. 1998, he said, the words falling heavy in the hushed room. "The night of the fire, your mother told me the truth. She was leaving. She said she'd carried a secret too heavy for her soul, and she couldn't bear it anymore. The boy I raised wasn't mine." Silence pressed on the pews like a physical weight, every spectator frozen, every breath stalled. Grandpa's voice cracked, not with weakness, but with memory. "She begged me to hate her," he continued. "But I couldn't. I loved the boy anyway. I took the blame for his fire. I worked the ranch into my bones to keep him safe." Across the aisle, Dad's face went nuclear, rage sparking like a fuse on dynamite. "You're lying," he spat, his voice raw with desperation. But Morales, calm and unflinching, stepped forward with a sealed envelope in her hand, the paper stamped with the authority of truth. "A DNA test, sir," she said firmly. "At your request last month, when you claimed the rightful bloodline to fast-track guardianship." The judge slit the envelope open with a letter opener, adjusted his glasses, and read aloud with the dispassion of a man delivering a sentence carved in stone. "Mr. James Robert, results confirm non-paternity." Gasps rippled across the room. Dad's face collapsed, then hardened, eyes darting as though searching for a lifeline that no longer existed. "Then the ranch, the water, the trust," he stammered. But the judge cut him off sharply. "Belong to no bloodline you can claim," he said, voice firm as a gavel. "But that's not why we are here." Morales placed the recorder on the evidence table, clicked it on, and the room filled with Dad's own voice. "I'll sell it without you. I pulled guardianship papers. I'll drink your river." The sound was damning, undeniable, echoing through the chamber like a confession whispered into the rafters of hell itself. In the back, 9 gray-suited men and women, Kodiak staff, shifted uneasily in their seats, their plan unraveling in real time. They rose to leave, but too late. Federal agents slid in from the aisles like curtain closers, their badges flashing, their hands steady as they blocked every exit. "James Robert," Morales said, stepping forward with the full force of justice behind her. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, elder exploitation, and conspiracy." The clatter of cuffs broke the silence. Dad lunged for the tape in a desperate final act, but Grandpa didn't move. He didn't need to. His hands, those old, stubborn, weathered hands, had already done the hardest thing a man can do. He had told the truth. As agents pinned him down, Dad twisted, his face red with fury, his voice a howl so raw it scraped the paint from the walls. "You never loved me," he screamed at Grandpa, eyes wide and wild. And Grandpa, eyes misted but clear, answered in a whisper that cut deeper than any shout. "I loved you more for not being mine." The judge denied guardianship, recognized the Timberline Trust, and froze every cent funneled into Kodiak's accounts. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning, neighbors peered from behind hydrangeas, and America's oldest pastime, the quiet joy of watching someone else's house burn, unfolded on the courthouse steps. When the proceedings ended, Grandpa made one request. His voice was steady as he turned to the judge. "Permission to travel. Just for one day." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Where?" he asked. "Glacier Bay," Grandpa said. "To finish what I promised." 2 weeks later, we stood on a public overlook, not a luxury deck or VIP suite, but a simple ridge of rock overlooking a world of ice and water. No butlers, no champagne. Just the sound of the wind, sharp and clean, and the groan of glaciers moving like old memories across the earth. Grandpa opened the urn, his hands trembling only from age, not fear. "She loved the river," he whispered, voice breaking. "Said it knew how to move on." He tipped the ashes into the light, and they swirled like silver dust before the wind carried them out over the water, mingling with the glacier's breath, vanishing into forever. My phone buzzed with one last email from the title company. "Timberline Trust water rights, licensed to county for public good. No bottles, no plastic, no corporations. Just a pipeline for farms, schools, and a town that had once doubted him, but would now drink from the legacy he had saved." Grandpa folded a paper into my hand. His will, updated after court, written in his simple, stubborn handwriting. "Kiddo, keep the water safe. If you ever think about selling it, take a long drink first and remember who it belongs to." He hugged me then, bone, denim, and decades of sacrifice pressed into a single embrace. "Tell your father." He paused, then corrected himself. "Tell James I forgive him." I looked back down the trail, half expecting him to appear. But Dad wasn't there to hear it. Weeks later, the last twist arrived in the mail, postmarked with no return address. A simple flyer, Kodiak Family Memories, LLC, dissolved. But across the bottom, scrawled in the same hand that had once keyed thief into Grandpa's truck, were 5 words. "I remember what I did. I'm sorry." I set the note by the sink, turned on the tap, and watched as cold, clean water filled the glass. The river Grandpa had fought to save. I drank it all, every drop, and for the first time since that night at Terminal 2, I didn't feel like I was choking. And as the sun dipped outside the window, its last light caught the branding iron hanging above our mantel. Not as a threat, not as a curse, but as a promise, glowing faintly while the river kept moving, carrying away the secrets, leaving behind forgiveness.